Hey everybody, it's Jenna. I vividly remember the reaction I had in October of 2019 when The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Suzanne Collins' first prequel novel to the events of the Hunger Games, was first announced. The original Hunger Games trilogy and the 4 movies that resulted from it had held a special place in my heart. Next to Twilight, it was definitely the biggest wave of YA monoculture that had enveloped me as a teenager. But in the years since, the real world had gotten much darker, and our popular culture had already felt overrun with prequels and spin-offs and villain-focused movies. I had worried Songbirds and Snakes was going to be a nostalgia play or a cash grab, not unlike some other fantasy franchises, and I definitely did not think I wanted to hear the origin story of Coriolanus Snow, the crusty white male authoritarian dictator in the book's present day. I was so incredibly thankful to be proven wrong. The book was a sweeping love story with a clear purpose, one that didn't try to fully humanize Snow to the point of excusing his actions in the present day, but that highlighted the very real and relevant tragedy of young men falling into extremism. It was also a fascinating snapshot of how much of the lore of the Hunger Games came to be. It answered questions that I didn't even know I had without over-explaining or committing to anything, and still leaving several decades unexplored for us to fill in the gaps. And although the 2023 film adaptation did make a surprising number of changes to the book, it still remained one of my favorite new movies of that year. Fast forward to last year and the announcement of Sunrise on the Reaping, Collins' second prequel, which just arrived in bookstores this week. The book follows a flashpoint set between the events of Songbirds and Snakes and the original trilogy, the 50th Hunger Games, when a young Hamish Abernathy became victor. I was intrigued to find out what motivated Collins to tell this particular story, especially because it was one that we thought we had all heard before. An entire chapter in the second Hunger Games book, Catching Fire, is devoted to the protagonist watching archival footage of those games. As it turned out, this was by design, as Collins teased that, quote, the story also lent itself to a deeper dive into the use of propaganda and the power of those who control the narrative. The question, real or not real, seems more pressing to me every day. I have spent the better part of this week diving into Sunrise on the Reaping, bouncing back and forth between a physical copy and the audiobook, which is excellently narrated by actor Jefferson White. I loved it, and there are so many specifics that I honestly want to scream from the rooftops about, most of which I will not do here because I want everyone to have the joy of discovering those specifics in the book or the movie, which is set to begin production in July for a November 2026 release date. But I just have to talk about this book in broad strokes and one particular thing that it made me think of: the art of a good retcon. Retcons, or retroactive continuity, are instances where an aspect of an existing story is changed, either through adding, subtracting, tweaking, or contradicting what the audience has already been told. While the trope has existed for basically as long as there has been recorded storytelling, the actual term did not originate until the late 20th century. E. Frank Tupper's 1973 book, The Theology of Wolfhart Pannenberg, might be the first recorded use of it, writing that, quote, Pannenberg's conception of retroactive continuity ultimately means that history flows fundamentally from the future into the past, that the future is not basically a product of the past. It also appeared in the letters column of 1983's All-Star Squadron number 18, when writer Roy Thomas credited the term to a fan, writing, quote, we like to think that an enthusiastic all-star booster at one of Adam Malin's creation conventions in San Diego came up with the best name for it a few months back: retroactive continuity. Has kind of a ring to it, don't you think? I have a complicated view of retcons and continuity as a whole. In certain instances, I agree with James Gunn that
none of this is real. It may be alarming to people, but none of it is real. It's all just stories that we're telling about characters, and hopefully there's authenticity and truth to those stories because we care about those stories.
Especially in the case for the wide timeline of superhero media, which has become a massive tapestry filled with reboots and relaunches and sliding timescales. I personally am not a fan of retcons that take something away from a story unless there is a really good justification to do so, or the method is too ridiculous not to admire. Sure, some of the most iconic retcons in popular culture are built around taking things away, either to streamline the story or to accommodate fans having a negative reaction to something that happened previously. Everything Being a Dream in the TV show Dallas, or the bifurcation of the X-Men movies timeline, are definitely examples of these, and there are countless more within the pages of comics and other genre media. With Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars on the horizon, I've seen plenty of talk about one particular potential one, wondering if MCU Tony Stark will be revealed to really be a Von Doom who was secretly adopted by Howard and Maria Stark. Despite the comic precedent for it, that feels like it would be needlessly taking something away from the success of Tony's arc in the Infinity Saga, especially when there are other ways to explain away that casting. On the flip side, there's already been so much debate about the upcoming second season of Peacemaker and how it will retcon away the Justice League's cameo in the season 1 finale. My prevailing theory was that Peacemaker was either high or deeply concussed, which again would be too funny not to respect. There are also definitely instances of retcons losing their significance or meaning, as evident by the comic history of characters like Hawkman or Power Girl, which present such wildly different origins that they almost cancel each other out. And honestly, I can make a similar argument for much of Marvel's modern mainline continuity, which often feels like a shaky house of cards that's built upon shiny, new, untold histories. But on a smaller scale, when being genuinely additive without overdoing it or holding the audience's hand, a retcon can be really effective. It's all just a matter of context and perspective. If it's going to take a big swing and change a lot in the process, it either needs to do so through a smaller section of continuity or one very specific hook. DC's Silver Age reintroduction of the Justice Society of America, revealing that they hadn't been erased during their decades of publishing limbo and were actually still operating as superheroes in a separate parallel universe, is one of the best examples of this in my mind, because it only had so much canon, most of which had been out of print for years, to go off of. In the process, it didn't undo any of the adventures of the younger, similarly gimmicked heroes in Earth One's Justice League of America. It just allowed both canons to get richer and weirder in the process. In terms of finding one very specific hook, my modern-day gold standard will be the changes that were made to Moira McTaggart during Dawn of X and Powers of 10, revealing that she wasn't a human helping the X-Men after all, but really a mutant with the secret ability to reboot and remember changes in reality. It not only gave new significance to Moira as a character, but it quietly reframed the messy entirety of X-Men history from the margins. Again, very little existing text had to be changed along the way, it was just enriched by this reveal. Having that sort of focus on a particular character or particular elements or particular theme is what makes a retcon really work. And it's something that Suzanne Collins does brilliantly with both Songbirds and Snakes and Sunrise on the Reaping, from multiple angles. Purely on a character level, the stories enrich the modern day actions and exploits of their protagonists. Both Snow and Haymitch are shown as jaded, tired men who have already lived entire lives before the events of the original series, but had no desire to talk about the specifics of them. Even the details around Haymitch's games from Catching Fire, which I'll get to in a minute, were not presented by him directly. So now we get to discover the specifics of their past lives, as well as what the world looked like while they were living them. In addition to the mechanics of how Panem and the games are being run, Songbirds and Snakes begins to build in a mythology of people, peppering in surnames that we can infer will pay off decades later. Without getting into specific spoilers, Sunrise on the Reaping takes this a step further, revealing certain characters or their relationships to each other in a way that only strengthens the events of the present day. Again, I am trying to dodge specifics, but the things revealed in this book made me want to immediately go back and reread every other book in this series, just to witness the legacies from the past and future being woven together without any sort of contradictions or major plot holes. There's also a beauty in retconning new meaning behind a specific element, whether it be a line of dialogue, a background detail, or an item that is significant in the present day. Granted, sometimes a retcon can get way too hyper-specific and way too superfluous, but I'm a sucker for those connections when they are done really well. My personal favorite is in the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, which had to retcon away that Lila was one of Rocket's known associates in the first movie, because, as we learn in Volume 3, she never actually survived the torture that they suffered at the hands of the High Evolutionary. As heartbreaking as this was, it could be reverse engineered into having new meaning. Maybe Rocket talked about Lila enough that it spread her legend across the cosmos, leading to her being on his rap sheet. And both Hunger Games books show how easy it is to do these kind of connections well. Songbirds and Snakes, particularly the book, is chock full of these, providing insight into how the tribute parade came to be, or why the Capitol soap all smells like roses. They're questions that I didn't even know I had, much less that I needed answered, but knowing the answers makes the text so much richer and more emotional in the process. Sunrise on the Reaping has quite a few of these beats as well, to the point that I've seen some complaints online arguing that it verges on becoming fanfiction, but I find that all of them work well in context. They don't meaningly guide us through every single step, as there are still decades between the three eras that have been covered in the books, and finally, they're the retcons that add more thematic significance to something. As I mentioned at the start of this video, Songbirds and Snakes providing more insight into Snow's ideology not only strengthens the lore of the fictional world, but it causes the reader to step back and look at the rise of white male extremism. Sunrise on the Reaping dives into the topic of propaganda in a way that could not be more relevant, and even when it says the quiet parts out loud, they still feel like a breath of fresh air in our modern moment. Collins also spoke about being inspired by the work of Scottish philosopher David Hume and the idea of, quote, the easiness with which the many are governed by the few. Again, a topic that can take on a whole new meaning in our moment. As I've previously said on this channel, fiction has the ability to inspire us into action, or at very least into rethinking the hand that we're dealt at a particular point in time, and it feels like Collins understands the weight of that wholeheartedly. Oddly enough, I feel like the perfect microcosm for what I've been arguing in this video can be found in a single franchise, Star Wars. While it didn't always do so perfectly, the prequel trilogy took some meaningful and very specific swings in retconning out certain pieces of backstory. We suddenly understood how these jaded, tired men started out, why one of them was radicalized towards the extremism of the dark side, and why certain MacGuffins or objects mattered even more than we realized, all while telling a story that happened to tap into the real-life sentiment of the early 2000s, and all while not really contradicting anything from the original trilogy. Clone Wars did the same, weaving Ahsoka Tano into the existing narrative of the prequels as if she had been there all along. The sequel trilogy then bypassed retcons in favor of an arc about the good and bad of pure, unbridled nostalgia, until it didn't. Instead of arguing,
it's time to let old things die,
Rise of Skywalker starts retconning the trilogy's own plot points, creating a convoluted story that seemingly rewrote decades of history, but didn't tell us the why or the how or why we should even care. Even the current arc across Ahsoka and The Mandalorian, culminating in the inevitable battle against Grand Admiral Thrawn, comes across similarly to me. It over-explains what's happening in the Star Wars universe during those particular years, but it also feels like a story that has to ultimately wrap up pretty neatly since there are no clear ripple effects or references to it in the present day. The Star Wars comics have fallen into a similar sort of trap as well, even contradicting their own lore as quickly as they establish it. All of this to say, with fiction, I subscribe to the mentality that characters or canon can be bent as far as need be as long as you don't fully break it. Our current media landscape, which keeps trying to build build interconnected universes wherever possible, has had a really interesting track record with this so far. But I think the Hunger Games franchise shows how to do it right. With Songbirds and Snakes, and especially with Sunrise and the Reaping, Suzanne Collins shows how to flip the script without rewriting a single word of it, all while delivering more intriguing characters and more harrowing and relevant sci-fi scenarios. I know it's going to change the way that I look at retcons and untold histories going forward and kind of elevate my standards for them, and hopefully it will for other people too. Also, I need the movie to be a smash hit. What's your favorite or least favorite retcon? Have you read Sunrise and the Reaping yet? Share your thoughts in the comments below without spoilers, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. Merch is available at the link in the description. As always, you can find me on social media at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, go read some comics.